Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival 2014. My name is Joe Isles, and I'll be your host for this session over the next hour. And today we'll be hearing from Professor Terence Fagan. Terence is chair in the engineering program at Central Piedmont Community College, a machining instructor and CEO of Creatrex Education LLC. He directs Fab Ed Carolina, located at the college in Charlotte, North Carolina. So at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, if you've been attending some of the other sessions, you'll know that we've been engaging with this idea of making and education and new forms of education. And when we spoke to Jean-Michel Molinard from Fab Lab Grenoble last week, we kind of just scratched the surface of this question of the educational role that Fab Labs can play. And if for those of you who saw or managed to catch up on Mark Miodownik's session yesterday, he also brought out this topic. So today we're going to hear a session. We're going to have a session from Terence to hear from someone who is passionate about this subject in particular. Before I hand over to Terence, I just wanted to mention a few things. We really want this to be an interactive session. We want to hear from you, the viewers. So it's your chance to ask kind of any questions you like, and I know Terence will be asking for your views throughout the session. So there's a few ways that you can get in touch. If you haven't done it already and you're watching on the Hangout, you can click the prompt from within the viewing window to launch, to be part of the conversation, to launch the Hangout window, and then you can use the Q&A app. It should be on the right-hand side to ask questions. Alternatively, you can use Twitter, and you can use the hashtag ThinkDiff to put questions to us as well. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Terence. He's going to give a short presentation for a few minutes, and then we'll get into some more interactive discussion. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it, and thank you to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for having this great event. I've seen some of the talks and have great, and I think it's for the DIF team. Before I begin, let me tell you a little bit more about background about me and how I came to this position. First of all, my mom was a teacher. My dad was a psychologist, so you can get the picture of teaching and learning was a big part of me growing up, and I never considered myself going to be in the teaching route. From a little kid, I always wanted to be an engineer. But in going that route, I went through school, and I was, of course, they say that good math and science, you should go the engineering route. I think that's total BS, basically. I think if you're good in math and science, you should become a mathematician or a scientist. Engineers actually, in my opinion, they make things. They make a better world. They solve real social problems with technology and groups of people. And as I further on went through high school, I started getting into this split of shop classes and things like that, and math and science classes, and I was not allowed to actually fit in my schedule things to actually make. I took one shop class, and there was 4 shop classes, considering each year you would take a consecutive shop class, and I wasn't able to fit that in my schedule, which was a bummer. So basically, I went. They said I was too kind of intelligent in math to do those kind of things. But I felt really akin to that. I didn't really develop those skills. So basically, I went to college without any learning how to make things with my hands, and of course, good in math and science. And I went through undergrad as an engineer, not knowing about how to make things, but actually, because I was good in math, I could visually see what this problem was telling me, and I can apply the skills, not really understanding the connection to the real world. So there was this big disconnect for me. Then in grad school, I was writing software for machining purposes, and the funding kind of ran out, and they said, hey, you're going to teach machine shop. And I said, well, I know nothing about machine. I have no experience. And they said, well, go down to the machine shop and make sure you have your safety glasses on and closed-toed shoes, and you'll meet Roland Heggie, who actually was kind of my mentor, but he didn't know me at this time. So I went down there and tried to find this Roland Heggie, and he was a machinist. He was a tool and die maker. And tool and die makers are the utmost machinists that you can possibly get. So I went and found him out, and Uh, he was working on he was working on a machine called the Makino 855 at the time. So I tapped him on the shoulder, and I turned around and I said, "Hey, I'm going to teach machine shop for you." He looked me, his glasses on. He looked me down, looked me up and down like I was going to get ready to fight him. And I said, uh, he said, "Well, do you have any machine shop experience?" And I said, "No." And he said some curse words and pointed at me, so I can't really repeat them. And then I said, "Well, Dr. So," and he said, again, some curse words came out of his mouth interrupting me. So I had to take a step back. And what I did is I took a step back and I said, "All right, how can I teach machine shop for you?" And again, he said, "That's a better question. So basically, you have to do everything I say for a year, and then maybe, quite maybe, you can teach machine shop for me." But in that year, what I've learned is to connect these dots that's very much missing in math and science fields of today. Uh, and so what I did was I started to cut steel and cut aluminum and then cut titanium, learn about EDM machines and plunging DI machines and wiring machines and CNC and lathes and mills, and started to kind of fully integrate that into my understanding of the real world. And that was the beauty of kind of the education. And actually, I still get to teach in the machine shop now, which I've kind of developed my skill set. So basically, a lot of that has to deal with, although that wasn't a fab lab, it was an education in making things. And that's what grew to, and that's what I'm passionate about now. And that's currently how I got into the positions that I am now. But I wanted to ask a question, and just put it out there. Does anybody know what actually a fab lab is?
You've heard the question from Terence. If you've launched a Q&A app, or you can speak to us on Twitter using #ThinkDiff, then we'd love to hear from you. Terence, it might be we'll see what comes in, but it might be a case of kind of people scrabbling around to type that in. So you might want to give them a moment to think about it.
Okay. Well, as they start to come in, I can tell you the definition. Which is actually a pretty good definition, but I'm going to explore more definition. And I just saw this the other night because Fab Labs have this conference called Fab something and number at the end. Last year was Fab 10, and it was in Barcelona. And there was this great documentary, if you wanted to check it out. And it said, it's a local fabrication laboratory which aims to democratize access to personal and collaboration invention using digital technologies to make almost anything. Now that's kind of the rote words of it, but I'm more interested in hear what other people have to say, because I have kind of a different slant on what Fab Labs are. Now we can talk about the history as some things start to mull around. Fab Labs started with MIT professor Neil Gershenfeld. They started in the late 1990s. It's a joint effort between the Center of Bits and Atoms and at MIT, which Neil Gershenfeld is the director, and the NSF Foundation. And it was supposed to be this outreach effort, and they put together similar tools and machines in this inner city Boston area. And then all of a sudden, another one popped up in Ghana. Another one popped up in all of these other different places. And then, so you fast forward 15 years now, and they've almost doubled every 12 to 18 months, these fab labs. And that's basically, they are focused on invention. They are focused on how to make almost anything. The outreach came about with research done at MIT, and they were discovering ways to basically make the personal replicator or the fabrication in the home. We're not there yet, but this is a merge between what's happening in the machine shops now and going towards that personal fabrication where everybody has it in the home. So, in my opinion, though, it's more than just machines. It's got to be more than just machines. It's about the people. and the organizations people create. Now, I like to think about the Fab Lab network as a brain, and its growing brain. Each neuron or each node of a Fab Lab is a neuron in a brain. They're connected through technology, and each one has a different kind of focus. Some may be focused on education, some may be focused on invention, some may be focused on prototyping, some may be focused on, now they're starting to actually make real products, not just prototyping. Some are focused on NGOs for helping the community, some are focused on wildlandish ideas, and some are in the inner cities, some are in the rurals of Africa, and that's the beauty of the Fab Lab. Every node on this network is completely different, but we're all connected to each other. There hasn't been a time when I toured my Fab Lab and I came on and I bring up all the Fab Lab networks, and we start waving at people and kind of communicating with people. And that's the real power, is the connection of these different cultures, which actually lends itself to education, because it's not just education on this technical aspect. It's education on cultures, community, economy, things like that we really need as a global community, as a global culture. And I think Fab Labs lend itself very well to not just the typical lab like a maker space or a hacker space or a tech shop, which are, oh, sorry, Joe.
No, I was just gonna pick up on that point, because when you said how would we define a Fab Lab? So for the people that are just joining, we've just had a few more people join. Terence has asked, how would you define a Fab Lab? So if you have a definition in your head, do put it in the Q&A box, or share it with us on Twitter using #ThinkDiff. I think my preconception, I think you were touching on it then, Terence, was of the very vague statement of a place where, an open place. I think that's an important part of it. So somewhere that's open, that people can go to learn how to make stuff. But I guess in my definition, I have just kind of buzzwords as well, and or keywords around it, which is like hacking, tinkering, maybe like more of like a hobbyist thing, and then 3D printing as well, because it's such a hyped up technology, I think, has become attached to this maker movement. And the more I've kind of learned about Fab Labs, certainly over the past few days with some of the webinars during the diff, is that it's a lot of what the Fab Lab movement is doing now is kind of, to some extent, trying to disprove some of that, those kind of preconceptions about what a Fab Lab is.
Yeah. So, and let me back up, because you mentioned hacker spaces, maker spaces, and there's also another one, tech shop, and of course Fab Labs. These are the four kind of movement, this counterculture to making things, which is fantastic from my standpoint, because I come from a manufacturing background, and to see this novel and new, where it's not this prescribed how to make things, it's people making things of all these different backgrounds, that excites me. And learning from them, and getting to share my stories, and hearing from other stories. It's just fantastic. What's different about Fab Labs is not again, not the technology. It's not so much the culture. You know, I'm actually part of Hackerspace Charlotte here in North Carolina. There's no really makerspace, but there is starting to be in schools and things like that. But what separates us is the actual network, global network. For instance, if I go to a hackerspace, they're not connected to any other hackerspace. They can't call up any other hackerspace on the whim, unless they know someone there. And there's not this. So once we log on to in the Fab Lab, once we log on to our website or our portal, we have access to other Fab Labs, which is very unique to hackerspaces or maker spaces or even tech shops. And we're encouraging, and we're being encouraged. So it's this culture to fail often in order to succeed. And that's actually from an IDEO, which is out in San Francisco. Very similar movement in out there in San Francisco as well. But it's what we've done here at Central Piedmont Community College is to integrate this movement with this our engineering curriculum, and it's we're still in this testing phase of what's going on. But before I begin with that, there's some other things with the Fab Lab in education. First of all, there's the Fab Academy, which is 6 months of activities. So Fab Academy is it's a project, one project a week, and then you have this overall project. And in that, you learn these skills. And it's not just learning these skills, you learn these skills to think. Rather than think to build, you're actually building to think. And I think that's that's basically opposite of what they teach in school. They teach you how to have, in manufacturing, to have a specific plan in place before you have the plan, and then you build it. This is completely different. This is you build and then think about what you've done, and then build again, and then think about it, and then build again. And you're constantly analyzing and constantly coming up with new and generating different ideas. And that's huge, I think, in this education realm of, and I think it's just starting now to begin in schools. For instance, Chevron gave the Fab Foundation $10 million to open up 10 Fab Labs in the United States. So companies now are starting to recognize the Fab Lab, as you called it, Joe, a movement of this. And each one is completely different, independent, and we make up an interdependent network of these different labs worldwide. Some other things that are going on in the community college. Of course, we've integrated it fully into our engineering curriculum, and we've taken that motto from the Fab Academies, where they actually build a project a week and then they have an overall project. Of course, it's not exactly Fab Lab, because with ours we have to integrate some engineering behind it. So it goes into that kind of slant. But there's a Fab Lab Wellington in New Zealand actually integrates their curriculum into art and design, which is fantastic, because they're using the same tools as we are here at Charlotte as they are in Wellington, New Zealand, and they're using it for same purposes education, but completely different skill set, from a completely different from us, but very much the same. So it's the same kind of process, and that's what I kind of want to drive home. It's the process, not the actual machines. As a colleague, Adam Harris, points out, it's the thing. Machines are the thing to get you to the thing, and I really like that. When he first said that, I think that's going to catch on. It has caught on at CP. And it's not so much the machine's not the thing. It's the thing to get you to the thing. It's the thing to build. And in building, of course, you have you learn a lot, especially from a constructionism standpoint. And constructionism started by Seymour Papert, and he believed that in order to fully learn something, you have to be passionate about it, and you have to actually use your hands and your mind simultaneously to build these projects, and then that's where the full learning happens.
I'd just like to just chip in for a moment, because we have a couple of questions in, and I think some of the I mean, one of the things that is coming up in is that you've really integrated this, as you say, with the engineering curriculum.
Hmm.
And one question we've had in is that it's from a teacher of students 11 to 18 years old, and really interested to know how um, she could get the kids involved in this. But I think maybe that so there's like that direct how can you get involved type thing, and then maybe a bigger question is how have you managed to integrate it with a pre-existing educational with a pre-existing curriculum? Because I mean we've done some work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation around bringing just new resources in, and it's really challenging. Was there any opposition you faced in getting to the stage you're at now?
Um, I was blessed with no. So the latter question is no. I had no opposition. The I saw a video of TED lecture from Neil Gershenfeld back in 2006, and I said, I want one. I want one for our community in Charlotte. So we built kind of a maker space, and luckily, you have to have the administration to support this. You have to have the administration and all the higher ups to say, throw out the old and what's new. Let's create something from scratch almost. Although we're not creating it from scratch totally. But we're given the leeway and actually the support now to go forth and test our evolution of education. We've done at our Fab Lab we've fully integrated it into our engineering curriculum. Plus we hold camps for kids in the summertime. So the past 3 years we've held camps where it's more of an engineering skills than a passion camp. But I think that they learn for instance, the first camp we hold was how to make your own quadcopter. So the kids, this is high school students. They came in and we taught them in a week how to build, maintain, and program their quadcopter, which is an intense camp for the kids. But again, the kids were so passionate about it because they wanted their quadcopter to fly. So therefore, I got questions that you would normally not get in a classroom. Like, well, how does it know it's up in the air? How does it know it's falling? How does it know it's twist and turn? And they built their own frames out of wood, and they etched their own boards, and they soldered their own boards, and things like that. That lends itself to this Fab Lab network. And this was before we were a Fab Lab, so we were. It's not like this. All of a sudden, we're getting a Fab Lab. It was a progression from what we started. And I started in a closet. And we hosted a U.S. first robotics competition team here, and they used that kind of closet for building their robot. So again, this year is the first year that we're officially a Fab Lab, but we were kind of a maker hacker space starting to integrate as we went on. So it wasn't this impulse; it was a slow, gradual.
Okay. And what about kind of advice for teachers who want to kind of get this going from the ground up? Maybe they have favourable conditions as you've had, but maybe not. What are some steps that they can take?
Well, you can contact there's a Fab Ed. They can contact me for more if they have pertinent questions as well. For instance, I'm helping set up a Fab Lab, another one, our second one in Charlotte, in a private school in Charlotte called Charlotte Latin, and they're actually well on their way to becoming. They got funds from their alumni. They are a private school, so there's that avenue, and they're having a kind of the same kind of thing. The same kind of path that I did. They're having little opposition, but I understand the opposition because there's a school in Chicago that I've kind of spoken with, and there's some opposition there. Not. They're just unsure, if this is the way they want to go. But I fully believe it's the future of education with this passion. There are grants as well. I've written, and that's how I actually got the funds for this. I've written a couple of grants for different programs that we have now, and also the machines that we have now in the lab.
Okay, so there's some potentially some funding out there as well for people who want to go down this route.
Yes, and if she's in the U.S., like I said, Chevron just gave $10 million to the Fab Foundation to set up 10 labs within the U.S. focused on K through 12 education. So not just college or university education. This is K through 12 education, and they may be able to help you as well. Or
okay. I know you have you've got some. We have some more questions, but I know you have more kind of examples and of really how you've made it work, and also maybe the wider potential. Did you want to continue on that, and we'll take some more questions in a few minutes?
No, we can continue with questions. I'd like to see what the audience does.
Sure.
And see,
So another question here. Interested to know if there's a tendency for boys rather than girls to be interested. So there's a big drive in the UK to get girls involved in engineering, and wondered if Fab Labs are seeing a positive effect here.
That's a really good question. Locally, no. I'll just say that. Not that it's any effort, but well, let me back up, because now, personally, I have 2 daughters, and although they don't use the Fab Lab yet, or they have in the past, they don't use it officially yet. They are on 2 robotic all-girls teams, and they use our labs to meet as a meeting place. So although they're not using the equipment so much, because the robotic team doesn't lend itself to that, there's in Charlotte anyway, there's an all-girls team for ages 6 through 9. There's an all-girls team from ages 9 to 12, and an all-girls team from 12 to 14 in Charlotte. So again, there's a movement to get girls in engineering and science, which I think is fantastic. But when you're a little kid like that, they don't understand the boundaries. Hey, why aren't girls engineers? There was actually a lady, I can't think of her name. She did it. She's doing a documentary on called something in skirts, and they interviewed our girls. Anyway, they interviewed all our girls on these robotic teams, and I think the more and more the making things happen. For instance, when I was at Fab 10, I was shocked to see how many women there are. I'm used to going to conferences, of engineering conferences, and 10% are women, and they're great ladies. But then I went to Fab 10 and saw 50% or even more than 50%, which were and they weren't engineers, they were makers. They were designers of clothes, they were designers of electronics. Like, for instance, I went to a workshop where we built a laser scanner, a do-it-yourself, not a laser scanner, a do-it-yourself laser cutter, and a woman was in charge of that. So again, you're starting to see this more and more. How to get, I struggle with this question, how to get girls in education or engineering, first of all, because I'm a man, and me telling a little girl that she can do it is not really the most. The best strategy that I've seen work is we've identified engineering women that are passionate about engineering and software and making things, to discuss to our younger girls how this is possible. So the more we do that, I think the better off we'll be a generation from now with being entered into the engineering field. But it will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. So
Okay.
I struggle with that question. That's a good question.
I'm just looking. We've had quite a few in. We had a comment here from Barbara Skarzinski, who says,
Sure.
you know her, okay, who says that, I'll just put it up on screen, people may want to join our Facebook group, Fab Ed, to meet others in the Fab Lab network. Fab Ed is a collaboration between TIES, so Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM, and the Fab Foundation to support the integration of Fab Labs and education. So is that perhaps you can answer, Terence, is that an international thing that people can take advantage of?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Ties actually helped us get our Fab Lab. We work closely with them on some funding streams, and they created Fab Ed just for this purpose of basically from K through 20 or 16, however you want to talk about it, in education. That's a great place to start. It really is. Actually, when I went to preparing for this, I actually talked to them, and they gave me the scoop on some things that I didn't know about. So that it's a great way to get.
Okay. You mentioned a moment ago about kind of how to. I mean, I think you used the example of you telling a female student that she could be an engineer, and kind of that isn't maybe the best way of going about it. I'd be interested just to hear your role on your opinion on how the role of mentoring in a Fab Lab. So mentoring, something that we're quite interested in at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So people learning better when they learn from someone else, kind of directly. So and teaching also being a great way of reinforcing your own learning. How does kind of what mentoring happen in a Fab Lab?
Well, since I'm a teacher, you have to. You're playing a role as a mentor, not just a teacher, a psychologist. Sometimes, the list goes on and on. I try to. We have in our culture in our Fab Lab. Every Fab Lab is different, per se. It's very laid back. But I tell my students on the first day, my job is not to create outcomes, is to create great opportunities for your learning. And there's a huge difference. That's just one thing. There's a huge difference. I'm not concerned so much with their outcomes, like if they get an A or B or C, D, F, whatever. My job isn't that. It's their job to create. It's their job for the outcomes. My job is to completely bring great opportunities. For instance, there's a project now. We're at a community college, so it's the first 2 years of those of you that don't know much about our community college and our U.S. system. Community colleges focuses on the first 2 years, and then they transfer either to a university or they get a job. So there's two avenues to kind of go about it. My students, again, sometimes are older, sometimes are younger. I get a plethora of students. Now, each student, of course, is different, but again, with the creating the opportunities, students have to actually put forth the work. I'm not going to work for them. I heard a great quote from actually a TED lecture, a person who was getting his PhD in Stanford, and he said, the best teachers, his advice, be less helpful. And I tell my students that. My job is not to do your work for you. You have to do your work. That's how we kind of run our Fab Lab. I will show you the starting point and the ending point. And if you ask questions, I will help you get there. And if you ask questions and show you're doing work, all of our faculty will take that extra step to actually help that person along. But again, they have to do the work. They have to be passionate about it. For instance, I tell, I wouldn't want somebody who hasn't done the work and me flying in a plane 30,000 feet up in the air going, well, I missed that day when I designed the plane. It kind of lends itself to that. So that's my philosophy, and that's our philosophy in the Fab Lab at PCC.
Well, the good time to bring in a question here from Jules Hayward, who said, "What is your view on accreditation versus open, self-directed study? Do you see the future of education in this space being accredited, and if not, why?"
Yeah, that's an excellent question. First of all, I haven't given that as much time and thought because we're so new at this. But again, when we integrated the Fab Lab concepts and skills into our engineering at CP, we have constraints by the state that we have to go by. And luckily, those constraints are loose enough that we can weave in some integration of it. And that's not changing any policies or anything like that. But I see that kind of being an issue about it. And this is long term, but we look at it, like I said, the passion projects where you get to build upon where you're going for a goal, but then you get to build upon these little itty bitty skills, and they all roll into one. Now with the accreditation, it happens. You may be missing some of those skills. So if there's a curriculum that maps out and modularizes these certain skills to do week chunk bits, or monthly bits of information, and you go, so you can say for a project, you've hit A, B, C, E, G, but miss F and D. You may be, this is long term about how we can approach it, is maybe there's a quiz or a test or something like that where they have to study outside of that to get an overall degree, or get that in certain skill set. And I think Khan Academy does a great job of that. So if you're not familiar with Khan Academy started by Khan, and now it's grown into this world of videos, which I think is a good supplement or a good complement to what should be sometimes missing when we're making things.
You touched upon also again a minute ago with you used the example of being a few thousand feet up in the air and someone having missed a class. This is a subject that's come up a few times over the past couple of days. When you have people going into a lab and making something, does there need to be any kind of rules or any kind of regulatory framework to ensure that to some extent they're meeting some sort of requirements? So the example that was given was the project in Nairobi making medical equipment that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
And also Jean-Michel mentioned a project that he's working on at the moment with people learning how to make artificial hands, and they will learn to make one, and then that artificial hand will be given to someone in need of that.
Yes.
His view was very much, even if they do it a bit wrong and it's not perfect, it's better than nothing.
Yes.
What's your view on that?
Well, it depends on each one. Is if you're in a learning environment, it's much different than when you're producing something for the real world. For instance, we've had this discussion in class multiple times. We actually reward boldness. If you're trying something new and different, doesn't matter if you fail or succeed. It's a matter of you trying. So we're trying to get the students to learn by boldly going where no one's gone before, kind of thing. And when you're doing that, you're going to have these missteps. You're going to have these failures. In a learning environment, it's easy for me because I don't have I'm focused on their learning, not so much what's going to happen outside. and it's a so the environment that we're trying to create is to learn in their safe environment now. So when they proceed, um, you still take these steps, but you've already learned, well, that material didn't work back when I was in college, or that process didn't work. What about we should try this process? So we're trying to do that. When you talk about, I'm actually kind of agree with Jean-Michel. It's better than nothing. Now, being an engineer, I cringe sometimes when I see some of these things. But because there is sometimes very little engineering behind it, that's going to be. But like you said, I live in a country where it's so overly engineered. It's kind of a breath of fresh air when I see all of that going away and then doing these innovative things, like you said, and it's better than nothing. But again, sometimes you may be putting people's lives at jeopardy too. So I'm torn between the conversation, or torn between the outlooks. I can see kind of really multiple different facets of that.
Mm.
If you do regulate this, you want to regulate it in a way that you don't squash the creativity or the culture. The culture and the anti-culture is going to come up somewhere else then. It's a great question. I still struggle with that.
Well, I think there are a few issues that we've ended up kind of coming down on both sides of. This was one. The other was around intellectual property. Not a subject I want to get in now because we have some other questions, but maybe that's one for another time. So, question here from Craig, who says, "What are the opportunities for Fab Lab students to work collaboratively with communities on design projects?" So engaging with their community groups. We saw some good examples of that in Barcelona. I mean, you probably went to the public Fab Lab and saw some of that. But more outside of those examples, what are the sorts of opportunities for doing this?
Well, I can talk on a personal level because what we've done also with part of that integrating in our engineering program, they get a choice of some projects, and they have to be community-based projects. You have to have someone. You have to have both sides. First of all, you have to have be willing to not know the outcomes as a teacher, and some teachers don't want to hear that. But you also have to have a community leader that's willing to work with students. So you have to have that in order for that to happen. Luckily, we've teamed up with Science Olympiad, which is big in the United States. And our engineering students are working with a person out of Science Olympiad to build things and to build prototypes and design certain apparatus for some of their events. And also we've teamed up with, and what's great also, we've teamed up with our graphic and advertising department to collectively build something. And that I think is where you can kind of get more real world as well. But for doing that, you need drivers on both sides of the community aspect and the teaching aspect, or in the Fab Lab itself. You have to have somebody passionate enough on both sides, not just one person.
Thank you. Just looking through a few more questions. So Andrew says, how do you get your students to share their design ideas and bring fresh thinking to it, and maybe take it to places they may not have considered? So this is, I guess, the old think outside the box cliche, but how do you encourage that?
That's a good question. Fab Academy is great at that. If you look at fabacademy.org, you'll see many ideas. And what they've done, and we've basically took right out of their playbook, is every work is done online. So you can view it online and then build upon those ideas. We've taken that aspect and put it in our engineering courses. So any work that they produce um, unless they're they're truly opposed to it, which we haven't had a student yet, put it up online. Therefore, you can share and build upon others. So basically, they each get a web domain, or in our web domain, they each get a web page that I get on, and I grade it. I don't grade it. The grading is not public. That's private between the student and the teacher. But their work, unless it's an exam or mostly the exam, everything is out there for the public to see. So Fab Labs are encouraged, and I still encourage at this point, because we're still learning, and we're not in business or anything, and still at a community college, it lends itself well to this open source mentality. And what you get with open source, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you get things to share and build upon your ideas. And then on the other, but on the double-edged sword, you still get this proprietary knowledge that someone else has designed. That's actually a conversation that happened yesterday, and we're still trying to figure that out, because our policy states one thing at our community college, but the Fab Lab states the other thing. So this is an issue that's brought up multiple times, and will be continued to be multiple times, and we have to actually amend it or become some sort of memorandum of understanding between the students and the school. So I think I've answered that question.
Well, if you haven't, I'm sure Andrew will come back.
Absolutely.
Next up, I want to take one from Ken Webster, who's actually our head of innovation here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Do you think the Fab Lab movement is really about the need for people to invent their own jobs, since there'll be even fewer mainstream jobs and opportunities?
And that's a good question. I think Barcelona lends itself well to that phenomenon. What they've done in Barcelona is they were in a recession for a long time, and I think they had the highest unemployment rate, and they didn't know what to do until these Fab Labs came about. And it's not a silver bullet. It's definitely not. But it is about creating things, creating jobs, creating new economies, not just creating products, but creating new economies and wedging out some of the old, or collaborating with some of the old as well. So it's an interesting time we live in, and especially if you're involved with the Fab Lab and Fab Lab network, to watch this progress and unfold is a fascinating thing.
We have 10 minutes left, so if people have questions, don't forget you can use the Hangout app, so you can launch the Hangout questions from inside the window, and you can ask your questions, and we'll take them if we have time, or you can add them on Twitter. You can use #ThinkDiff, and you've got 10 minutes left to get your questions in, so don't hesitate to send them to us. As you know, Terence, we work on this model called the circular economy, and it's been the topic of many of the presentations and workshops and different sessions during the Disruptive Innovation Festival. How have you managed to get youngsters to think of new selection of materials that can be used? So maybe these are materials that can be recycled, or maybe they can be safely enter a biological system again, so maybe they can safely biodegrade and regenerate a natural system. It's one of the, I wouldn't say criticisms, but one of the comments that some have made about Fab Labs is that lots of materials are used at quite a rate in many different types of projects, and there isn't a huge amount of thought that goes into where those materials come from and where they're going to end up. Is that something that you've looked at in your Fab Lab, or is there maybe some examples you could look at from elsewhere?
Yeah, no, actually, I've used to do LCA, life cycle assessments on different products. We did a large grant for biofuels, and I wrote a grant we wrote a small little grant to build EcoBox, which is a self-contained shipping container where it's a livable habitat, and actually on campus now. So it's totally off the grid of the school, but totally in its separate. So it has water filtration systems. It has the solar panels and things like that. And in that, in offshoot, I'm always concerned because of my manufacturing background. How do you make things? So what we've developed is kind of a module for our manufacturing class, and it's actually pretty funny because it's life cycle assessment of a banana split. And in that, but you think about that, a lot of materials, a lot of energy goes into a banana split. First of all, you got to keep the ice cream cold. And anybody knows that about thermodynamics. To keep something cold, that's an enormous amount of energy. All right, so you got that. Then you have the plate that you're eating and the forks that you're eating. So again, they have to be manufactured. They have to be produced. The old school manufacturing is they take it, they manufacture it in China, and then they ship it over here by boat, and then they fly it to Charlotte so I can have my ice cream, which is ridiculous. But it gives students the way to think, oh my gosh, this actually is produced somewhere else. My bowl, not even to go into how you're going to package this ice cream. So now you have cardboard, and in cardboard you have wax and layers of multiple layers of maybe some were made with toxic chemicals. So I mean, it's like once you start to look at a banana split and levels of depth in that banana split, you get to understand some of the choices that companies have to make in order to even package things, either to ship things, to transport things. It's enormous. Now you can even take it to a third degree, and in order to package it, you got to build the machines to actually create the package, and then you package it, and then you get your banana split. So you're third degree away. But in order to make those machines, it's like this hierarchy and this history that can't go away overnight. It needs to evolve over time. And the Fab Lab, and I heard the other day, which is awesome. It is kind of like the Starship Replicator, because Joe, you can design something at a Fab Lab in England, digitally send it to me. I can produce it here without that shipping cost, which is fantastic.
And this is this quote that I heard in Barcelona this year of, it's easier to ship recipes than cakes and biscuits.
Yes.
And I can't remember who that's attributed to, but you might know better than me. But I think that once you start thinking like that, it kind of flips the manufacturing process on its head, and there are a whole range of new possibilities in around the items you just discussed, so shipping costs and all the factors involved in that, but also around things like customization, and then intellectual property as well. This other topic that we touched upon. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to take a couple more questions. We've got a big question that I'm going to ask you in just a second, but have you managed to get young designers to see nature? So this idea of biomimicry, so learning from living systems. Have you managed to get them to see nature as the first point of inspiration in the design process, rather than trying to create a technical solution first?
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, and this was not because of anything related to what we're doing now. And my girls, and I've done some for the school as well. We always watch a video on biomimicry in class, in our introduction to engineering class. But personally, one of my girls' robotics teams needs to do a presentation, and the presentation is on biomimicry. So they spent time. I mean, they created ways that we spent the other day to exploring this. So even at that age, at 9, they're learning from nature. You know, we talked about spiders' webs being pound for pound stronger than steel, about how mechanically linked rather than atomically linked. We talked about maybe designing something like a turtle shell for a helmet. You know, all these wild ideas started going, and that's in the youngsters. It's just as a solution to when we talk about biomimicry in class is this notion of this industrial ecology that needs to happen in order for our species to help the planet. You know, it's kind of funny because they talk about saving the planet, which the planet's going to be here. We may not be. So that's the iffy statement of this. But we introduced that by, and I had conversations in class. They're like, well, what can we learn from an ant? You know, I was like, whoa, we can learn tremendous things about the ant. You know, it acts as one organism. Each ant is a node on this network, and they're working all collaboratively, but they're totally decentralized. So what's going on in there to what engineers can learn from that is a tremendous amount. I mean, that's just one thing.
Good link into a question we have here. What is the strength of interdependency between Fab Labs? Do you have any success stories of worldwide collaboration? Because when we were speaking before this session, you were describing the Fab Lab network in the same way with all these different nodes. You've also described it as a brain.
Yes.
What are your favorite success stories of harnessing that power?
Of course, mine are on education, so I'll give you one on education. In Sitges, Spain, they got together with other Fab Labs in Europe, and they developed this 4-week, I think it's 4 to 6 week camp for I think it's high school students. And each week they got to spend in another country at a Fab Lab creating their own designs, which is fantastic. So not only did the kids get to travel and to develop different cultures, they're learning about how to make things. And they're learning from different people, which I think is totally different from the transition is the teacher knows everything mentality, which is not the way to think about it, in my opinion. So they got to travel around these different countries, Germany and Spain and France. And I think they went up to the Netherlands, I'm not sure. But they got to travel to these different countries 1 a week, and they developed their own ideas and in their own culture and things like that. So that's one thing I see. First of all, like I said, I'm an educator, so that's the first thing I look for.
That's a great example, and hopefully we can find out some more information about it, because I think that taps into that mentoring question that we looked at earlier. We've got 1 minute left, and I wanted to save it for this question we've had in. When do you feel we'll see these more progressive models of education becoming more mainstream? You even asked for a date prediction. I mean, you thought this was going to be easy, didn't you?
Yeah.
For the tipping point, but date prediction for the tipping point in this necessary transition, and are there any particular points or triggers that need to be in place to make the change?
That's a great question, and I can only look on what history has told us about doubling every Fab Labs, and I'm not just talking about Fab Labs. It's more than Fab Labs in a sense that it's the way we teach kids and adults. More and more, when I first started teaching 10 years ago, there was none of this talk, none of it. And then I started to see pockets. More and more, it's beginning to get to the teaching mainstream. So it's this bottom-up approach rather than this top-down approach. And so it's this groundswell that's moving. For instance, I keep constantly getting asked, even around Charlotte, to speak to educators and things like that, people like that, in the field of education to discuss. Like, for instance, we did a workshop and to about 25 local teachers. And one of the questions came up because as we were doing in our fashion of here's this little task, now go find the means, Google it and figure out how it happens. Now we'll talk about what you did. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's not. Maybe you found something that I didn't. So it's constant learning. And one of the questions was, "Do you really teach like that?" And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "Wow, we don't." That's so it's not even like you said. It's teachers being exposed to that. It's administration buying into that. And as a teacher and educator, I tell my students I don't know everything. I know a fair amount compared to them, and I know a little amount compared to other people. But and I'm not going. And I tell them I'm not going to be your only teacher. Outside world is going to be their teacher. More and more, I think, as some of these start to progress, you'll start to see. Now, a date, I don't know. I mean, I would love to see it quickly, but again, I can't kind of see that.
That's all the time we've got for questions. We did have a definition to your question at the start. Someone said a Fab Lab is a D&T department for adults. I think something hopefully we've maybe seen today is that it's actually has potential to be far more progressive than a lot of the D&T departments that maybe we're seeing in educational institutions and schools around the world today. So, Terence, thank you so much for giving your insights on the educational potential of Fab Labs and for answering the questions today. We've got some praise coming in, so I think people really enjoyed your insights from kind of the front line of this shift, so thank you.
And if they have any questions or if they want to talk offline, I can easily talk with them or speak with them, email or phone or however they want to do it.
We also have the so we have the usual routes of Twitter and so on. We also have the cafe on thinkdiff.co, which awesome. It would be great to stimulate some discussion on this. I just wanted to bring people's attention to a couple more sessions we've got coming up at the Disruptive Innovation Festival this week. Today, 4 p.m. GMT. We'll be hearing from Thomas Diaz, who's another key player in the Fab Lab community worldwide. He'll be speaking in the Cities and Flows tent at 4 p.m. On his Smart Citizen project. And then to continue the education theme, tomorrow at 3 p.m. GMT, we have our headliner from Ken Robinson. So a lot of the ideas we've been discussing today about interdisciplinary learning and learning by doing, and then finding your passion for particular subjects. I know that Ken will be touching on that and loads more Thursday, 3 p.m. So I hope lots of you can join us then. But for now, thank you very much for taking part in this Disruptive Innovation Festival session.